Good morning, Friday, May 22nd at 6 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time. My name is Brian, and this is the Center Aisle. All right, my center Aisle friends and family here. We got a long one. It's early. Get your coffee. Nothing better than coffee in the morning. Sit back and let's cover some stuff here. All right, folks, today we got to talk about something that kind of disappeared from the news for years and suddenly it's back. Cuba. Now, if you're seeing headlines about sanctions, military ships, indictments, Marco Rubio, intelligence meetings, and wondering what in the world is going on, you're not alone. I was the same place. Because, folks, the media keeps throwing random Cuba headlines at people without actually explaining the full picture. So today, let's do a full center of the aisle breakdown on where things stand with Cuba and why tensions are rising again. And why the Trump administration seems to be turning the pressure way up. So, let's go a bit of a history here, so stick with me. We're going to go over some important points. So, number one, Cuba has been an adversary to the U.S. since the Cold War, basically. In 1947, official start of the Cold War, President Harry S. Truman announced the Truman Doctrine to stop communist expansion. Remember that. The U.S. begins containment policy. 1948 to 1949, the Berlin blockade. Everybody remember that one from school? U.S. responds with Berlin airlift flying in supplies for nearly a year. Can you imagine the cost? 1949, the Soviet Union successfully tests its first atomic bomb. In 1949, North Atlantic Treaty Organization is created. And then from 1950 to 53, the Korean War, Communist North Korea invades South Korea, right? U.S. and UN forces intervene. China supports North Korea. And war ends in a stalemate, kind of where Iran is. 1955, Soviets from the Warsaw Pact in response to NATO. 1957, space race begins. Oh boy. USSR launches Sputnik, the first satellite. Massive US-Soviet competition in space begins. 1961, Berlin Wall built. In 1961, they built the Berlin Wall. East Germany builds the Berlin Wall to stop people escaping to West Berlin. So in 1962, things get heated. The Cuban Missile Crisis. Probably the most dangerous moment of the Cold War. Soviets place nuclear missiles in Cuba. President John F. Kennedy confronts the USSR. The world comes extremely close to nuclear war. Real close. 1960s to 1970s, Vietnam and proxy wars. U.S. fights communist expansion in Vietnam. Soviet Union backs communist governments around the world. That's a lot of them back then. Numerous proxies wars occur in Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East, where we're at now. So here comes the good stuff. The Reagan era. Everybody loved Ronald Reagan, 1981, 1989. This is where Reagan becomes central. Reagan takes office in 81, okay? So Reagan calls the Soviet Union the evil empire. Dr. Evil. Massive U.S. military buildup begins. Diesel defense spending increases sharply. We know where my mind's at. Strategic Defense Initiative. Reagan proposes missile defense system and nicknames it Star Wars. Soviet fears they cannot economically keep up. Mid-1980s, Soviet economy weakens. USSR struggles economically. Afghanistan war drains Soviet resources. Communist system starts failing internally, which is where they basically do. 1985, Gorbachev comes to power. Mikhail Gorbachev introduces perestroika, economic reform, glasnost, more expense, openness. He realizes the Soviet system is collapsing financially. In 1987, Reagan's famous speech At the Berlin Wall, Reagan says, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." This seems like it was just yesterday. This becomes one of the defining Cold War moments. In 1989, the Berlin Wall falls. So in 1989, we tore down the wall. East European communist governments collapse. Berlin Wall comes down on November 9th, 1989. Huge symbolic victory for the West. Huge. And Trump's building another wall. We take one down, we make him take it down, and we're going to build one ourselves. So, 1991, the official end of the Cold War. The Soviet Union collapses on December 26, 1991. USSR breaks into independent nations. United States becomes the sole superpower. Did Reagan end the Cold War? Most historians say that Reagan played a major role in ending the Cold War by applying military and economic pressure. Same thing that we always do. Rebuilding the U.S. strength. Let's see, what else did he do? He challenged the Soviet leadership publicly. He wasn't afraid. Pushing the USSR into an arms race it struggled to afford. Their financial system was collapsed. But other huge factors mattered too. Soviet economic, what I just said, it collapses, which is probably the biggest proponent to why. Gorbachev reforms, public unrest in Eastern Europe, still. Failure to communistic internally. It's communism wasn't a real big thing. They didn't quite get it down yet. So the fairest answer is Reagan helped accelerate and shape the end of the Cold War, but he did not end it alone. Even though, back when I was in school, it said that he did. But for many Americans, though, Reagan became the symbolic face of the Cold War victory. Communist government, after Fidel Castro revolution in Cuba, remember Fidel? Fidel Castro led the Cuban revolutionary that overthrew Cuba. The leader was Batista in 1959, and after Cuba became communist state aligned with the Soviet Union. So here's the Batista timeline just before Castro. Now all this is important as to why we are where we are today. Cuba ruled by Batista, U.S.-backed authoritarian leader. He was an authoritarian leader. Many Cubans viewed Batista government as a corrupt and an oppressive government. 1953 to 59, Cuban Revolution, Fidel Castro and revolutionaries, including Che Guevara, fought a guerrilla war against Batista. Castro's forces eventually won. Batista fled Cuba on January 1st, 1959. So after the revolution, now things start to open up a little bit here. At first, Castro did not openly present himself as a communist publicly to the world. He didn't want people to know that because he knew if he did, they were going to come get him. But over the next few years, private businesses were nationalized. Communist trend. Sound familiar? Opposition parties were crushed. Sound familiar? Cuba aligned closely with Soviet Union. U.S., China. Building a wall. Relations with the United States collapsed. But I'm not saying Trump's a communist. I'm just saying a lot of familiarity here. By 1961, Castro openly declared Cuba socialist communist. Okay, socialist communist. It's pretty much hand in hand. A lot of people just don't understand what true communism is. But Cuba sits only about 90 miles from the shore of Florida. The Soviet alliance terrified the United States back then. That led to the failed Bay of the Pigs invasion in 1961, the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. The missile crisis was the closest USSR came to nuclear war during the Cold War again. Now, those were some scary times. There's a movie out about that. I'm going to have to try and remember and put it in the description. But Soviet collapse didn't end Cuban communism. Even after the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, Cuban remained communist and pretty much still to this day. They're not doing so well, but Fidel stayed in power until illness forced him to step aside. And then comes his brother Raul Castro, later took over, which is who we're hearing about in today's times. He's 94 now. His brother Raul Castro later took over. Cuba today is still governed by a communist system, though it has made some limited economic reforms over the years. Decades of sanctions and embargoes. Sound familiar? Obama tried to normalize Cuba somewhat. Trump reversed much of it. Go figure. Biden partially softened some things, and that is another go figure. Beat yourself in the head with a hammer. Now Trump's second administration is turning pressure back up hard. I mean, they're really putting the pressure on him. So you got a lot of things going on. So basically, the U.S. Cuba policy, it changes more than gas prices change lately. I mean, it's always changing. If you could, please go down below down there somewhere and hit subscribe and like and comment. I'd really greatly appreciate it. It would really help the channel. Give us a pretty good boost here, help get that algorithm in there. If you could, please and thank you. Okay, now stay with me on this one, folks. I go cross-eyed just thinking about this part of it. New sanctions announced, Trump. Pressure on foreign companies doing business with Cuba. He's doing that with everybody, right? You do it with Iran, you're going to get sanctioned. Cuba's still on state sponsor of terrorism list. We actually have a list, kind of like a grocery list, of state-sponsored terrorism. Increased U.S. military presence in the Caribbean. Reports of intelligence concerns involving China, Russia influence near Cuba. Raul Castro indictment headlines adding fuel. That's going on now. So here's something important that we need to know. This isn't just about Cuba itself anymore. This is about geopolitics in America's backyard. That's 90 miles. You can almost throw a missile that far. And this is why you should care. Truly you should. 90 miles is nothing. Migration crisis concerns. Illegal immigrants. You been down to Miami lately? National security concerns. That should be easy to see. China, Russia influences near U.S. Communist state. They're all in bricks together here. Drug trafficking and regional instability. That still goes on today. Election politics in Florida. Oh, huge. Energy and shipping lane concerns. Iran, Strait of Hormuz. Yeah. So, with all this in mind, and listen, whenever Washington suddenly remembers a country exists after ignoring it for years, there's usually a reason. And if you've watched any of my videos, you know, as I always say, where there is smoke, there is fire, and it's not from a Cuban cigar. Those were illegal in the U.S. back when they did the embargoes. Not because of the bad cigar, just didn't want people buying them. So what happens next? Here's the possible outcomes. This is your center aisle breakdown. Could be more sanctions, which we know Trump, there will be. More diplomatic pressure, that's already starting. Cyber intelligence operations, we already have drones down there flying everywhere. Migration issues worsening. Well, Trump jumped on board before he started hitting Cuba, so he got in front of the migration thing before he did this. Possible negotiations eventually. I think they're already happening, kind of. Maybe. Continued military positioning. We have a carrier strike group there on their way there right now. The Nimitz class. It's there or on their way there. Does it mean the administration is signaling they're going to be passive on Cuba? Absolutely it does. So, in closing, if you made it this far, drop your thoughts below. Do you think Cuba is becoming a bigger national security issue again? Or is this mostly politics heading into the midterms? To me, it seems like you want to stay out of the politics. You have enough going on. And as always, guys, if you enjoy these center of the aisle breakdowns where we can actually slow down and explain the full picture instead of screaming at each other for 30 seconds, hit the subscribe button, please. Please, please, please hit that subscribe button. I'd greatly appreciate it. And until the next time, I will start bringing back more updates with Cuba as they come in. Things are kind of progressing slowly right now, but they will speed up here quite a bit. So I think that we may be seeing the end of Iran coming, but I'm going to hold that to myself. Just remember, I said it now, and I don't think it's going to end the way that we were told it was going to end, but we'll see. We'll see. Just no nukes. Total surrender, right? Complete and total surrender in Iran. We'll wait and see if that happens. So, with that, that has been your center aisle breakdown. And I will be back later with some updates, I'm sure.